Have you ever looked up from a project and realized it's dark outside? You haven't eaten since breakfast, your foot's asleep, and when did you last pee? That's hyperfocus, and it's one of the best and worst parts of having ADHD. In this video, I'm going to explore why that is and give you tips on how to make your hyperfocus work for you. Okay, I have a confession to make. I made an entire video about hyperfocus and then realized while I was editing it that I hadn't once talked about my hyperfocuses. I didn't really want to start all over again, so I figured that instead of just telling you, I could just show you. And I'm still going to give you all that information about ADHD and hyperfocus. So let's get started. Hyperfocus is an ADHDer's ability to zone in and focus intensely on one subject. It doesn't really matter what that subject is, as long as it's giving us a dopamine boost. For others, hyperfocus looks like we're zoned out, but internally, ADHDers are firing on all cylinders. We can think, work, and learn faster than anybody else when we're in this state. We're taking in more information, we're processing it faster than we normally can. We love to dig deep, and hyperfocus allows us to do that. When we're in hyperfocus, time ceases to exist. We can be at it for hours, and it can feel like minutes to us. When we snap out of hyperfocus and return to the real world, we're often dehydrated, starving, exhausted, and if we were hyper-focused on something we love, we have a deep yearning to get back to it. That is until our hyper-focus ends, often out of nowhere, and we have zero interest in continuing that hobby or interest or even important tasks. Even if we know we need to, we do not get to control the hyper-focus. We don't control what we hyper-focus on or how long we're going to hyperfocus. All we can do is learn how to predict what we're going to hyperfocus on and build structure around that so it doesn't interfere with our lives. If we don't do that, you bet your hyperfocus is going to show up at the worst time and the worst place. But before we get into how to predict what we're going to hyperfocus on, let's get into those pros and cons. When we're in hyperfocus, we lose touch with everything else, including our own bodies. So we don't experience the need for food or water or sleep until we come out of hyperfocus and we're in dire need of one or more of those things. Hyperfocus also derails our priorities. While you're focusing entirely on your favorite activity, all your other responsibilities just get pushed aside. Your brain does not prioritize importance, it prioritizes interest. Neurodivergents often struggle with transitions, but when we're in hyperfocus, that's tenfold. It's really hard to stop or switch to a new activity. And sometimes even just being interrupted in the middle of a hyperfocus is going to cause extreme irritation. And of course, all of these things can lead to burnout. But if you can learn to self-regulate enough to avoid burnout, then hyperfocus can be your secret productivity weapon. Productivity, while ADHDers are in hyperfocus, is so good that neurotypicals can take classes on how to get into that state. They call it the flow state, and it is considered the be-all and end-all of productivity hacks. And for ADHDers that often get called lazy and struggle to be productive, this hyperability is deeply satisfying. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do a thing if you know that when you're in that state, you can do it better and faster than anybody else? It's also a great way to build skills and expertise. And depending on how often your hyperfocus switches to something else, you can either become an expert in one area or a jack of all trades that can do just about anything. One of my biggest hyperfocuses is creativity. I used to think this was a problem because I would get hyper-focused on watercolors for a few months and hyper-focused on needle felting for another couple of months, and I just kept bouncing around all these different hobbies. before I realized it was all the same hobby. It was all creativity. And once I recognized that that was a value of mine and not just something that I did for fun, that's when my life really started changing for the better. Hyperfocus is often referred to as the zone of genius, and it's for a reason. When we're in this state, we are at our best. Even neurotypicals are at their best when they're in flow state. I don't think that creativity is just about art making. It's actually more about problem solving. And when you hyperfocus on solving your problems, you find more solutions than if you're hyperfocusing on the problems themselves and just ruminating on it. Which leads us straight into our tips and tricks. Tip number 1 is use external cues. Set an alarm for an hour or two after you start so that you're gently reminded that the world still exists. You can actually get alarm clocks that buzz when the time is up, but you don't actually need to turn it off. This can be really helpful because it allows you to keep track of time without actually interrupting your flow state if you're deep in it. You can continue working, but with a better understanding of how long you've been at it. Blocking time like this is called the Pomodoro method, and there's lots of information on it if you want to check that out. But one of the great things about it is that it really helps you start to understand time. When you're using the Pomodoro method, you start tracking how long things take, and that's not something that comes naturally to most ADHDers. So you start to understand that there's no point in starting a project that you know is going to take an hour if you only have 15 minutes. So if you can't set your alarm clock for an hour later to be reminded to kind of step out of hyperfocus, then just don't do that task at that moment. Tip number 2 is strategize. Save creative projects that require a lot of focus for the times of the day that you have the most focus. That way you can ride the hyperfocus wave and get the most work done. And then there's tip number 3, which is to know your triggers. It's hard to know at what time of the day you have the most focus. So at first, you're going to need to pay attention to when you easily fall into hyperfocuses, especially the kind that you don't plan. For instance, I can hyperfocus the best in the mornings, which works great if I plan my day around that. But if I don't, I'm still going to hyperfocus in the mornings. I'm just going to spend it cleaning my junk drawer instead of getting ready for work. So instead, I've built my morning routine around this knowledge. So the first hour of my morning is given to hyperfocus. I journal, I do yoga, I do all the things that either help my brain focus or the things that require focus. And when I do that, it makes the rest of my morning routine go much smoother because my brain isn't stuck trying to hyperfocus and me fighting against that. The conditions that work best for hyperfocus are super personalized. So you're going to have to experiment with your time to see what works best for your brain and your hyperfocus. Tip number 4 is to set boundaries in advance. If you know that you go into a state of hyperfocus when you're in the office, then just put up a sign on your door saying, "Do not disturb." If you know that being interrupted in the middle of a hyperfocus is going to set you off and send you into an emotional dysregulation spiral, then just don't answer your phone when it rings during that time. Turn it off if you need to. The thing is, let people know that this is a part of your process. People are a lot more understanding when they know why you behave in certain ways than when they start assuming things or making judgments on your behavior because you haven't let them in and allowed them to be privy to the workings of your brain. And finally, tip number 5, recovery time. Recovery time is real and you need it desperately. When you're in hyperfocus, your brain is working overtime. So just because you can get 8 hours of work done in 2 hours doesn't mean that your brain didn't do 8 hours worth of work. If you don't allow yourself to rest and restore your energy, then you're not going to be able to focus on anything. That's the difference between zoning in and zoning out, which can be very frustrating if the only times that you can focus on anything are when you're in hyperfocus. So make sure you're getting enough rest. Thanks for watching. I really hoped that you enjoyed this slightly different than my usual talking head video. I think going forward, I'm going to explore a lot more about different formats and different types of videos, just to keep things interesting. And yeah, I hope that you subscribe if you enjoyed this, like, share, all those good things, and I'll see you next week. Bye.